Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's episode of Hey Sister. Hey sister, how you doing?
Hello, sister. I am doing wonderfully.
I
I
am
can't just complain.
I am so glad that you're doing wonderfully and you don't have any complaints this evening. So, folks, thank you for tuning in. We're going to get into the conversation this evening because we got a whole lot of things that we want to talk to. When we started Hey Sister, this is our attempt, and not attempt. It's really just taking the conversations that we normally have and bringing them out to you. What's up, Jody Joe? Thanks for tuning in. Make sure you go ahead and tell some folks they need to watch tonight because we got some serious stuff we're going to talk about this evening. But this is just extending the conversations that we normally have. And it's for sisters, it's by sisters, it's about sisters and misters and all that good stuff. All that stuff is cute and fine and dandy. But tonight we got some serious things to talk about because what's happening across these United States of America is some foolery. And if you haven't been tuned in to what may be going on in your state legislatures, let me tell you, you might want to go take a look at what they are proposing in your state.
Yes, that is correct. Wow. As you can see, I have my hair out. I picked it out a little bit here in honor of Governor Katie Hobbs signing the Crown Act in the state of Arizona by executive order. In theory, it does not apply to private sector. Okay, so it does only really apply to state agencies, but the cities of Tempe and Tucson had already passed their respective Crown Acts. So yeah, so Katie Hobbs has done that by executive order, and so for those who don't know what I can say that she just I'll read a snippet. It's for far too long Black women, men, and children have been deprived of educational and employment opportunities for wearing their natural hair, said Governor Hobbs. Today I am issuing an executive order that demonstrates the need to prioritize the protection of culture and allows individuals to show up as their true selves without being subjected to race-based hair discrimination. And so this was on, I think, March 17th that she did that. And so as many folks have heard about the Crown Act, creating a respectful and open world for natural hair, and Dove has been the company Dove has been the soap, not the ice cream, has been very instrumental in getting the Crown Act legislation pushed elsewhere. Now, of course, we know that there were attempts in the U.S. Senate, right, that unfortunately failed. But swear our hair, and
I have whip it back and forth. Mine is not
yes.
whipping right now. If I take this band off, it might whip a little for y'all.
Now, of course, one good sis Rachel Dolezal somehow ended up at the signing, and I don't know whether to celebrate or be utterly confused. I don't know. And if you go to her Instagram page, I thought Rachel had changed her name and went into hiding, but apparently she's out again. If you go to her Instagram page, you will see her at the signing, and
Rachel says she been down for the cause.
Clearly, and wearing her naturalish hair, I guess, for the event. So
whatever it takes, whomever it takes, I'm glad that it passed. Now comes, how do you make it actualize in real hiring decisions and in real interviewing settings? How does it become a reality? That's what's always the very interesting thing about these legislation. Yes, girl, Rachel made an appearance. She sure did.
well, and how does it show up for real? But also, part of the conversation here is that Governor Hobbs is hoping, right, that this will set a precedence for private industry, but it doesn't require that. So that's also a hurdle as well. But you know what? We'll keep fighting. We'll keep signing petitions, and we'll keep showing up in the places and spaces that we need to show people like they just can't do whatever they want and legislate our bodies, from our hair follicles down to our toenails.
Yeah, and maybe we need to have Professor Wendy Green back on, who was on with us probably a couple years ago now, talking about the Crown Act and her work there, and she's continuing to do her work, and advances have definitely been made. But shout out to Arizona for at least getting that done. So
Katie been fighting left and right, up and down with the GOP. They've been proposing some things like what we're going to talk about here in a few minutes with some of these other states. They've been throwing those things out as well, and she's just been vetoing. So it's hard work for the.
It's a mess. But typically we start off, hey sister, with some hot topics. So we want y'all to
wanted to explain, because they usually have the curls popping, or
you usually have the curls popping, or you're pulled in a nice little top chignon bun on top. But make sure y'all join the conversation, the comments, like, follow, share, subscribe. Tell folks about this conversation. This is one you want to come back to. So again, shout out to Arizona for the Crown Act. We said we're going to do one hot topic tonight.
Yeah.
And it was all abuzz my timeline during the week. And that is Ciara. And if you notice, I said Ciara, period. Because that's all that needs to be said.
Right. Because let me tell you again, if my body looked like Ciara's body, especially if I had brought 3 children in this world, it would be Christina, period.
That's it.
Again, let my body ever look like Ciara's, y'all gonna be sick of me. Plain and simple. Sick of me. I'm gonna be in a bikini at the grocery store. That's how it's got to go down.
So there's all of this buzz. So at I think it was the Vanity Fair, one of the many
Vanity Fair after
party, Oscars after party, which had a theme of being naked. And one Miss Ciara understood the assignment and did it well. Because I was just trying to, she was just smooth all over, like smooth. I even have a mole or two or a little blemish. Like, she was smooth, front, back, side to side. All was smooth and felt and proportioned, and period. She did the doggone thing. That's right, Jody. We gonna say it again. Hey, if you got it, do it. She understood the assignment. Many others also followed the assignment, but they were not talked about. And so this is where I want us. I'm just talking to us, those of us of a deeper melanin hue. They got a little melanation in our skin. I'm gonna need y'all to leave her alone, leave her husband alone, let them people live their lives the way they want to live them lives. Stop standing in judgment just because you wouldn't do it, couldn't do it, can't do it. They ain't none of your business.
Well, a lot of the same people who were saying, who have problems and saying, oh, she shouldn't dress like that as a mother, as a wife. Some of these same people were talking about, oh, Russell Wilson is a square and he's this and he's that. Come on. Like, listen, he was there with his wife. He looked very dapper. He was obviously okay with, the theme and the outfit, and probably was very proud that his wife, again, who has brought 3 babies into this world safely, had the ability to even pull that off.
Yeah.
I'm not mad at it.
I'm not mad at it either. But I want us to stop with these false, Chris Rock said it, this selective outrage, this faux outrage about things that don't matter. Because I recall even when Serena was on the cover of, I think it was Sports Illustrated, when they had their naked magazine, and all the vitriol, she received from all types of people, because first she looked too good, first she don't look good enough, it's this, it's that, it's something or the other. And I just need us to allow people to be comfortable in their own skin. And just because you're not comfortable don't mean you have to project your discomfort onto somebody else.
Well, and again, it was a party, so your kids didn't see it, right? Because that also kills.
No, see, that's part of the problem. People are out here talking about kids, and we're going to get into some of these bills and legislation. They're talking about kids and protecting children. Then take the damn phone out their hand and take them off the internet, because you really ain't protecting nobody, because they're exposed to everything.
Yeah, literally. I just saw I just saw a video the other day about some of these cartoons, how so much pornography gets pulled into most of the pornography is on YouTube, because a lot of it is disguised as cartoons or it's animated, and parents, they give their kids a phone and they don't know that it's all the things that are coming up, right? And if you pass by and you see your kid watching a cartoon or something that's animated, you just think, oh, okay, they're still watching the series or whatever. And they talked about all the different things that were being they were being exposed to. So you're right. I don't think Ciara is in theme for a party is gonna change the overall direction of your child's maturation. I think you have more to do with that than she does. So, but I will say again, I don't expect, because Ciara has been in this body for her whole life. Me, on the other hand, it would be new to me. So, like I said, I'm gonna be at the grocery store in a bikini, but I assume that she don't get that excited about her own body, so she only does this for things like this. Like, I'm certain that she probably doesn't go to the grocery store looking like that. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure she doesn't go to the public library like that. I definitely know she doesn't go to her husband's games like that. So it's like, what are y'all talking about? She was actually on theme. And if nothing else, as the melanated folks we are, we love a theme. A theme party, we shall be on top of
the white, the black.
The 90s, the 70s, the 80s, the flappers, the masquerade ball. We love the theme.
Okay. Listen. Let's see, that part about the phones and the internet. Yes, honey, y'all would have to tell me to go home. Exactly, honey. I'd be everywhere like, hey. Anyway, girl, do your thug fizzle and be out here and live your best life. That's all we got to say. How about that? You're tuned in live. If you are watching on YouTube and Facebook right now, you're tuning in live to Hey Sister. If you're watching it later, then please still drop some things down in the comments. Let us know that you watch and what you have to say. But today we're going to get into this topic tonight about another day in the USA. And so, one of the things they talk about legalities in the law all the time. Well, guess what? Many of your state legislatures are in session and they are wilding out. Okay, borrow a phrase from Nick Cannon. They are wilding out, and you need to be aware and understand what is really going on with some of these bills and legislation and how they will have ramifications on your life. So first question you might ask, well, what's all this about? What's the motivation? Really, the motivation and the why, it doesn't even matter at this point. Is what are you going to do to stop it? Or what are you going to do to make a change? What are you going to do to make a difference? Because these things will have significant detrimental impacts. So the first one we want to start about, because I'm here in Florida, so we shouted out Arizona for doing something good. They have a Democratic governor who's doing all of this. She's doing all the blocking and tackling and vetoing she can to keep her Republican legislators under control for some of this foolishness. But in Florida, you've probably seen something on the internet about this. Florida House Bill 999. It is it falls under Reforming Education and Employment Committee, and it falls under Reforming Education. So I'm going to drop the full text of the bill. Now, what you've seen go around in a meme and kind of hear people commentating on about it eliminating the fraternities and sororities and some other things. Now, that is not currently in the language of the bill. The bill is written so broadly and so, what's the word I'm looking for? Vague, that it can be left up into interpretation. And depending on who might serve and who appoints boards at these universities, at these state institutions, so not, at these state institutions, who appoints the governing body is how these laws will then be interpreted. We've already seen a takeover of New College. New College is a small liberal arts school in the Sarasota area with all of 700 students. And the governor got rid of the whole, they got rid of I won't say the governor, because it's really not the governor that's doing it. It's the legislators who take these actions, and the governor signs them into law. So they got rid of the whole board, installed a new board of people who are not wholly qualified to know anything about education, appointed a president, honey, who is being paid $700,000 a year. They ain't got but 700 students. Now, how they do that math? That's some of the stuff and the foolery that's going on. And they wipe out these certain areas of study. So since I know there was specific language in the bill you wanted to read out, I don't know if you want to share the screen and show it.
No, I can just read it, but it says the board shall periodically review the mission of each constituent university and provide updates or revisions to such mission as needed, examine existing academic programs at each constituent university for alignment with the university's mission, and provide direction to each constituent university on removing from its programs any major or minor in critical race theory, gender studies, or intersectionality, or any derivative major or minor of these belief systems, which is any major or minor that engenders beliefs in the concepts defined in S.1000.054A. So that was one part that I found to be interesting. There were some other pieces here. Again, to your point, I didn't see anything that specifically calls out Black Greek lettered organizations or other organizations that predominantly serve Greek. I don't want to use the M word. Non-majority populations. I don't know what's the right word that I should use under the circumstances. Let me get to the diversity. Okay. A state university is prohibited from using diversity, equity, and inclusion statements, critical race theory rhetoric, or other forms of political identity filters as part of the hiring process, including as part of applications for employment, promotion and tenure, conditions of employment, or reviewing qualifications for employment. Again, to me, that language is so super vague. Like, I don't even know what critical race theory rhetoric is and how to define that and who's making the determination if that is a thing or not.
And keep that little piece there now. So remove all diversity, equity, inclusion statements. So let's take ethnicity out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And let's just talk about pay equity. Let's just talk about pay equity, which we do not have.
Mm-hmm.
So that cannot be a consideration. A university cannot look and assess the pay of our professors and see if there's an equity gap and make adjustments accordingly. That's what that says.
Well,
or how it can be interpreted, I should say.
And to that point, section 1004.06 has prohibited expenditures, and they are promote B 1004.06B says promote, support, or maintain any programs or campus activities that violate section 1000.054A or that espouse diversity, equity, and inclusion or critical race theory rhetoric. Now, what I find very interesting is in that statement is diversity, equity, and inclusion have been mentioned twice in sort of a negative sense. But then later on, there is when they're describing different courses, it says model civic discourse that recognizes the importance of viewpoint diversity, intellectual rigor, and an evidence-based approach to history. I really don't know how you have an evidence-based approach to history without actually telling the full story of the history of a people, a society, certain laws that were passed. Like, how do you talk about women getting the right to vote and not talk about the fact that women didn't have the right to vote? How do you have a conversation about African Americans becoming citizens of the United States unless you talk about the fact that they were at one point not citizens? So
there was a news story this week about a textbook company who's trying to get a textbook here in Florida purchased, right? Because these companies make these books. So the original book, The Story of Rosa Parks. She said on the bus, she said in a section on the bus, white only, blah, 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 the story. Then they did a remix and took out the whites only part. But she sat down and refused to get up. Like, that's what they got to. And then this same board said, oh, well, you've gone too far. What?
So what did she get arrested for? That's what I want to know.
But that's the whole point. They trying to adjust to these inane, idiotic, vague language, and then their book still got rejected as not as a viable textbook. But so we can't tell the truth because it might be critical race theory rhetoric. When we remove the words whites only, that wasn't, that didn't go far enough. But then when we just said Rosa Parks sat down and didn't refused to get up, then you've gone too far. What is it?
Right. Well, I hate that there was somebody who obviously went to law school at some point, found out about critical race theory, and they were like, this is the ticket. This is how we're going to coin everything that we don't want to talk about in historical context. Mm-hmm. We'll just call it critical race theory.
And well, there was another viral moment that happened on the internet, and I don't know if you saw it, where a woman was promoting her book and talking about woke and wokeness. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago about co-opted words, and the journalist was like, "Well, what does that mean? You've said it a few times. Tell us what that means." And she was, "Oh, this is going to be one of those viral moments." Yeah, boo, because you wrote a whole book, you got a chapter dedicated to it, and you can't even define the term.
Right.
Like and I want someone to do this in a national forum because it's coming, because you're seeking presidential office. I want someone to ask him to define critical race theory and define wokeness. And he's not gonna say anything. He's gonna talk about every other thing but that thing, because there is no definition. And this is a bunch of foolishness that we need to be on the watch for, because it does have impacts in our education. And what happens in Florida doesn't stay in Florida, because they're trying to do similar things in other states. I'm gonna let you have the last word on this before we go to the next state.
No, I think you summed it up. At the end of the day, I just don't understand what it is that why are we allowing people to co-opt language that we just know better, right? We know that critical race theory was an actual course that was taught in law school. And if you ask the average American who is between the ages of probably 25 and 50, have they ever, sans going to law school, have you ever taken a critical race theory course? Or if you ask them, do you recall a time when you were enrolled in a critical race theory class in K through 12? And I really do believe that the answer is absolutely not, because there hasn't been. So we've allowed this term to be co-opted and utilized, and for someone to put it in a proposed bill, and you tie the term rhetoric to it, it's like, I need you to define, like, I do believe, and we've talked about this before, I do believe that in order for us to have a civil conversation about things, we all should make sure we're on the same page in terms of the definition of a thing.
Yes.
And if they can't give me if you can't give me a comprehensive definition of what critical race theory rhetoric is, it should not be going in a bill.
That's right.
So
absolutely,
please, Floridians, because like you said, it's not staying in Florida.
That's right. And many other states are doing similar things under the guise of education.
Right.
And nary one of these people have a degree and or a background in education. Because another thing came up in Florida this past week, and I can't remember what bill this was. This was about young ladies. This is not hot. Them not being able to discuss.
Oh, birth control, isn't it? Or,
no,
their period. Their period.
Cycle.
Yeah, their period. Yeah.
It was. They were putting it to 6th grade and above. So it was like, So that means teachers they couldn't provide a pad or anything. They couldn't have a conversation. They couldn't bring it up. So I remember being a 10-year-old who started their period at school. What would that have done? Well, in the 4th grade.
Right.
And you couldn't say, you can't talk about it, and if the teacher talk about it, or if anybody talks about it, does this even make sense? And I looked at the man who was presenting this legislation as if it's protecting children in some way, shape, or form. And I was like, clearly you don't know, like the average age of menses is down to like 10. Some girls as early as 9 years old start their periods.
No, they don't.
It's just another day in the USA.
Because again, biology has been so sexualized, and that's not how which if we want to talk about South Carolina,
Jody, this your state.
All right. So another day in America. So South Carolina, this is what a news headline reads, and then we'll get into the actual bill. House Bill, 3549, titled the South Carolina Prenatal Equal Protection Act of 2023 would ban abortion and criminalize it as homicide, meaning women who get abortions could face penalties ranging from 30 years in prison to a death sentence. Now, of course, legislators are saying that they do not have any intention on criminalizing mothers. However, this is how it reads. It's a bill to amend the South Carolina Code of Laws by enacting the South Carolina Prenatal Equal Protection Act of 2023 by adding Section 16.3-6, 16.3-105, 106, 107, and 108, so as to define person to include an unborn child at any stage of development, and to ensure that an unborn child who is a victim of homicide is afforded equal protection under the homicide laws of the state, with exceptions. and by adding sections 16.3, 760, 761, 762, and 763, so as to define person, to include an unborn child at any stage of development, and to ensure that an unborn child who is a victim of assault is afforded equal protection under the assault laws of the state with exceptions. Just so you know, it says Section 1, this act may be cited as the South Carolina Prenatal Equal Protection Act of 2023. Section 2, the General Assembly finds the following: acknowledging the sanctity of innocent human life created in the image of God, which should be equally protected from fertilization to natural death. The purpose of this act is, 1, to afford equal protection of the laws to all preborn children. What is a preborn child? But anyway, preborn children from the moment of fertilization. And later it says, as used in this article, fertilization means the fusion of a human spermatozoa with a human ovum. As used in this article, person includes an unborn child at every stage of development from fertilization until birth. I need some help, because that sounds like more protection for us, for sales, than it is for me.
So I'm gonna just drop this here. This is from the March of 80% of miscarriages, 8 out of 10, happened before the 12th week of pregnancy.
And will you please tell us what the medical terminology is for miscarriage?
Oh, spontaneous abortion.
Yes.
Because they have these other, so language is powerful. Words are powerful. And when they say this is a prenatal protection, that sounds, oh, it's a prenatal protection. I want prenatal. I want women to have protection in the prenatal. But when they say from fertilization, which at fertilization don't nobody know they're pregnant.
Right.
I mean, especially if it was an enjoyable experience that you was, participating in. You ain't thinking about that at that moment. I'm gonna just say that. But I remember I was, recounting to you as we prepared, when I was like, oh wow, my first pregnancy, my first foray, and when I learned, I was like, okay, we did the home pregnancy test. So I called my doctor the next day, immediately trying to schedule an appointment. And then they were like, when was your last period? And they were like, okay, we'll see you at 8 weeks. Like, don't even try to come in here before 8 weeks. And then they did a test. Why? Because 80%, when those cells start mitosis and meiosis, all that stuff we learned about in general biology, when all of that's occurring, a lot of stuff go wrong and don't even make it that far.
Right.
So what are we going to do? Because we're protecting the zygote, but not the so then I was wondering, well, what about the women who are in those domestic abuse situations? Are they going to press charges against, because it sounds like the zygote has more rights than the woman who's getting her ass beat.
Well, and also, if you're going to call something the South Carolina Prenatal Equal Protection Act of 2023, shouldn't there be a South Carolina Prenatal Care Act of 2023? Because, again, so many women, Black women, look at our rates of mortality, and we don't even get provided the same level of care. And so to suggest that, and I know they threw in with exceptions, right? But to suggest that having an abortion for that a person is defined as a egg and sperm that came together, that is a person. I mean, are they paying taxes? Like, I don't understand how that becomes the definition of a person. Like, I feel like for like all of our life, like people were mad when Ketanji Brown Jackson wouldn't define a woman, right? Because she understood what was being done, right? The games that were being played, the political games,
the language.
And so people didn't like that she wouldn't define woman, but you're now telling me, even though I think most of us have been calling a person, a human, a person, a thing, way after when they've actually entered the world. And now you're saying it's at fertilization.
So the infant mortality rate in South Carolina is there are 6.5 is what the number is. So infants 6.5 infant deaths per 1,000 live births.
I wonder what the national average is.
And then I didn't even look at the maternal morbidity and mortality for mothers. So,
and we know it's going to be different for women who identify.
And then we're not even factoring in, because again, we can't talk about equity and inclusion, according to Florida. So we can't talk about equity. So we can't even factor in those things that might have disproportionate differences based on someone's ethnic presentation, socioeconomic background, or what have you.
Yeah.
This is the foolery they're doing in your state legislatures, people. You need to go check it out. We just here to just put out some information because we want y'all to go check it out and be informed.
Yeah, I mean, and it's cool to have the memes and stuff like that, but it really is much better to just do a quick search of the actual language to understand more of how deeply this stuff runs.
Yes, absolutely. Because the memes, people put their spin on. But if you read the language for yourself, you can see how it can be insidious and harmful, because it's all left up to interpretation. And then we know we go into other fights. So right now, in Texas, there are fights that are happening right now in the state of Texas. And we mentioned this a few weeks ago, I believe, regarding their abortion laws or restrictions. And there are a group of women, I think it's 5 women, who have had various incidents. But the one that stood out to me the most was this woman at 17 weeks. They were like, her cervix had prolapsed, like, you're not gonna make it, this baby's not gonna make it, and we think we should terminate this. But since they still had a fetal heartbeat, they didn't terminate. They were like, well, when you get critically ill, that's when we can do something. So literally, as this fetus is passing, and not until she was critically ill and then could be put in the emergency room and went septic. Now, if anybody knows anything about sepsis, when someone is sepsis, that means they have an infection throughout their entire body and their organs are beginning to shut down. So the damage that was done to her body as a result of them not being able to give her an extent to her abortion care is ludicrous. It's absolutely ludicrous. And these are the types of things that are happening. These are the real life consequences. And while it might be a small percentage, no one in the richest country in the world with supposedly the best and most advanced technology and healthcare system should have to be subjected to nearly dying because they didn't want to perform this abortion for a fetus that was not going to survive. That's my take.
And that's the thing. So based on South Carolina law, is the fetus wasn't going to survive. Yes, you detected a heartbeat, but you knew it wasn't going to survive. So that personage matters more than the actual personage of the mother who is literally here
and dying
and
as a
dying.
result. Yes.
I don't, it, as the people say, make it make sense, but you can't make it make sense.
Mm-hmm.
Because all of this conversation around abortion is about what you all, not you, but what, first of all, it's an issue that is so many men who are writing these bills, or introducing these bills, but also because it's the idea that in their mind they've defined abortion as a form of birth control, and that is not what it is. And that's what's so enraging. The vast majority of women, I believe, who have had to have abortions did not choose to do that. They did not do it as a form of birth control. They did it primarily because of medical issues. And that's,
it could be medical, it could be socioeconomic, it could be a woman who, if most women who do seek abortion care, I mean, if you go by the data and not how we feel, are married women who are like on their, like, I don't want to have no more that oops baby. I don't want that oops baby. I had these ones that I plan to have and I can't take no more.
Right.
Because I can't care for them.
Right. Well, again, and
they got whole husbands at home.
And that's the point. It's not just a matter of birth control.
No, it is not. So again, we are talking about today, y'all tuned in to Hey Sister. We talking about another day in the USA and the things that are going on in the various states in which we reside, don't reside, have resided in the past. Let's go on to this next one, this next issue about the Texas Education Agency takeover of Houston Independent School District.
Clearly, they missed over that I. They just played that I to the left.
What?
Because it's independent.
What, independent?
Yeah. It's INDEPENDENT. Do you know what that mean, man? Like, clearly y'all don't.
Nope.
So now we're going to create an issue between the state of Texas that is largely Republican versus the city of Houston, or the Houston city government, or not city government, but the city of Houston and Houston Independent School District, that largely Democratic.
Largely Black and Latino.
Largely Black and Latino, although, let Ted Cruz tell it, he doesn't know that he's Latino. But anyway, yeah, I'm going to leave it to you, sister, to give me some more explanation as to why this is even, why we're doing this. Other than for political reasons.
I think it's similar to this next story that we're going to talk about, because the truth is there is no real true justification. Mm-hmm. They want to say that it's, I guess, failing. But this is, to me, this is another moray into taking over to implement your own form of like to really rewrite teaching stand by people who don't teach and don't know teaching standards, don't know anything about education. So I just feel that it is really an effort. It has nothing to do with education. I mean, because Houston Independent School District is larger than some whole state's school district.
I think it says it's the 8th largest in the country.
Yes. Orange County, Florida, I think is the largest, but that's a whole nother conversation for another day. But once again, I think this is a blueprint. So we talked about Florida first. and what they're trying to do on the collegiate level. I think this is a blueprint. So there, I think Texas will adopt, if this stuff passes in Florida, Texas will adopt it. And then if this passes in Texas, then Florida will try to adopt it to take over Orange County Independent School District and other school districts that are primarily led by people of color.
Yep.
And it is to ensure that we completely whitewash education. And we already have too much arbitrary, as I see it, policies and standards. And then they wonder why we can't keep teachers, or don't teachers are leaving and retiring and leaving the profession. Is because of stuff like this.
Yeah.
So you have political appointees who are coming in, and there is no real, ask them to explain it. There's no real justification. There's no real explanation. So we want to provide exceptional education experience. What does that mean? And who defining exceptional? It's just like we're saying, who's defining these terms? And we saw what happened in New Orleans when they take over, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what we're going to do? Oh, we're going to put in what? Vouchers and school choice. Basically, we're trying to destroy public education, because then if I don't educate you, I can keep you subordinate and basically in slavery of the mind. But that's a whole nother conversation for another day.
But I don't know that it is a whole nother conversation for another day, because I do think all of these things, again, there's intersectionality in all of these conversations. If we are, it is about, so technically the enslavement of people ended in, after the passing of the 14th Amendment, I believe it is 13th Amendment, I believe it is. Mm-hmm. So, however, we know that, so I cannot enslave you in that way.
Mm-hmm.
But there's other ways. There's other ways to keep you subordinate. Like you said, if I strip you of education, if I strip you of your history, then you won't know that you possess greatness. You have fought for yourself. You have fought for the right to vote. You have fought. You have served in political office. You have done these. If you don't know your history, you think that Rosa Parks just sat on a bus and then she was just, I don't know, asked to move because she was in a section. I don't know what section she was in. So if I strip you of your history, then you don't believe in your own greatness.
Mm-hmm.
If I strip you of education, then you believe that the only things you're qualified to do are the things that I say you're qualified to do,
mm-hmm.
which in large part is in service to me. Because one of the things we didn't talk about is how also in the state of Florida, Ron DeSantis is trying to criminalize anybody who is found with an undocumented person in their home or in their car. Yeah. How many of these companies and corporations, though, have hired undocumented people to do work, especially in the home?
I guess he's going to shut down all the orange groves.
But in the homes and the businesses, in the care of wealthy people, in the service of wealthy people. Mm-hmm. So again, if I keep you uneducated, I keep you subordinate, I keep you in a position of virtual enslavement. And virtual, speaking of technology and the things, the way we see our society moving, if you are not keeping up with technological trends, there's only going to be so many things you're able to do. Yeah. So I do think they're all interconnected. But
here's the other thing. They talk about these schools underperforming, and I get it. Some schools do underperform. But why? So we never get to the root cause of why. We never get to these arbitrary rules that and all of these arbitrary requirements for testing and for this, then that makes a school failing, right? Because if you don't pass these certain tests, then you're failing. And we need new measures of what is someone being educated or not, because clearly, we know, again, because we know a little bit about history, we know about bias in testing.
Well, and I think,
and so but we have these arbitrary tests that, oh, well, you're failing because you're not meeting these standards, or you're not meeting these testing standards. Well, you have these kids who are in dire circumstances, and you want miracles to be put out. So, oh, now you're failing. Now we're going to take over. What? You don't even have a system in place to support the families.
Well, if you created the system that creates the failure, then you can't turn around and say, "How dare you be failing?" One of the things we're going to talk about next is Jackson, Mississippi, and if you look at a place, again, these places that are largely largely Black and brown, these places that are quote unquote Democratic controlled in terms of their local government, but maybe the state government is Republican controlled. If you look at the history of a place like Jackson, there was white flight, right? And so if you and the way we have school systems, funded is based on your tax base. So if I leave an area, I take with me all the higher paying jobs, and I move into the suburbs, the natural inclination for people to do is run to the suburbs as well, because now they're trying to chase this tax base in order to get their children in these school systems. And there's only so many spots and all of these things where, like, let's just start there. Redlining is a real thing. It happened. There were certain, and it continues to happen in different ways now, but there are certain areas that you didn't want people of color to live. And then when people of color started living in areas that were previously forbidden, then white folks left and they took all their toys and everything with them. And I do believe that, there is, I do believe we need to have a real conversation about having our own things, so to speak, and not having to rely on others for certain things. But at the same time, the way the system is set up, we cannot get the type of tax money to put into the schools in order to properly educate in the first place. And all of that is a system that was created to purposely keep poor people poor while rich people were getting wealthier. Mm-hmm. And couple that with what we see from an incarceration standpoint, couple that with what we see from over policing, couple that with what we see in terms of pay disparity. Like, all of these things they're just so multi-layered. But then we just say, oh, the school is failing, so we're going to take it over. You're going to take it over and do what? You had it at one point. Every public school in the United States of America at one point, or every public school system at one point, was segregated. Mm-hmm. And you had control of it. Yes. And you determined where people could live and where they could go to school and who they could date, and all of you had control over all of those things. So what are you going to do now differently than you did before? And I would venture to say nothing. This is just a new tactic for doing the same old stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And as it relates specifically to the city of Jackson, we've known about their water crisis, and I know that they are suing the state. And I think, as well as in partnership with the EPA, a racial discrimination lawsuit as it relates to the water crisis. But one of the things that they're trying to do now is to extend the policing ability of the Capitol Police, because Jackson is the capital of the city, capital of the state of Mississippi. And so extend the jurisdiction of the Capitol Police, so that's the police that just does the Capitol grounds, into the entire city.
And create a special system of judges.
Yes, so the judges have been duly elected. Well, they not good enough. This is a systematic, again. So here's the thing. You talked about flight and white flight specifically out into the suburbs and what have you. But we also know about the return into the cities.
Oh yeah, baby, they setting it up for the return.
That's what this is all about. I mean, it's the same thing. I mean, it's the same thing with Houston. This is about the return.
Because the South will rise again. This is about that romanticized belief that, the lost cause. This is about the romanticized belief that the South was not historically, what we know by history, that it wasn't that the Civil War wasn't about enslavement, that this is about people who just have a certain way of life and they just want to exercise that certain way of life. And it's like, no, like, yeah, I see the games. I lived outside of Jackson myself for 3 years. And yeah, the water system didn't just get bad. It's been bad. And y'all been knowing it was bad. So, but if white folks are like, I don't live there, I go into work, but then I jet back out and jet home, and then now they've even spread some of the businesses out even further. It's like, y'all, you wait till something gets so dilapidated, so torn down to the ground, and then you go back in and buy it for dirt, buy up all the property for dirt cheap.
We've seen it in Detroit. We see it every time we return to New Orleans.
Yes.
And trust and believe, it's happening in Jackson too. So the question is, I think, the whole premise of this show tonight was about another day in the USA. This is what's happening all over the United States. Now, we just concentrated on the southern states because those are the states that we are most familiar with, and the states that, like I said, we've either been around and or have lived in. But this stuff is happening everywhere. It's happening in Arizona. It's happening in Minnesota and Wyoming. It's happening all over these United States. And I think we need to ask ourselves, are we really about the Bill of Rights? Are we really about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? Or are we about controlling people's ability to have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? Or that only a few are the arbiters of defining what that looks like and how one must go about achieving it? I don't know. But I do know that these laws, these attempts are harmful. And if you are not politically engaged, you need to be. Does it get tiring? Yes. Is it exhausting? Absolutely. But it's not new. As you said, this is like wash, rinse, repeat. And so the only way we maintain rights is that we continue to fight for them. Because otherwise they will disappear. That's my saying. What you say, sister, as we get ready to wrap up for this evening?
I say that it's exhausting. I say that, we talk about Sunday school all the time and trying to do better. I say Jesus really wants me to. It's like, oh Lord, you tested me with some of your children. I tell you. Yeah, I think at the end of the day, again, the fight for civil rights, the fight for equality, the fight for justice, it's an ongoing fight. And it's unfortunate because one would hope and pray and wish that and dream that we'd get to a point where folks wouldn't cut off their nose in spite of or despite their face, in spite of their face or whatever the saying goes.
To spite
Spite their face. Yes,
Mhm.
thank you. To spite their face. In other words, there are people who would rather do damage to themselves. They would do damage to themselves thinking they're doing damage to me and you. They would, as the saying goes, drink poison and hope we die. And
Mhm.
that's what's so ridiculous to me. We live in a society where we really do have the opportunity to have nice things. We do have the opportunity to be able to live with a measure of peace and harmony. Nothing is going to be perfect, but I just don't think it has to be this bad. But maybe this is just the plight we're with. This is the way of the world, and we just got to keep fighting. But it's exhausting. It's exhausting, and it's easy to feel, for me, it's easy to feel hopeless because you see all of these things, you see these constant attacks, and you want to give up. You want to say, okay, well, they're clearly more committed to hurting and harming the vast majority of people than seeing other people do well, because again, everything is a zero-sum game for us, right? In order for you to win and me to win, you got to lose. And I'm like, it just really doesn't have to be like that. So I guess we will all keep fighting.
Mhm.
But I do believe, and this is the last thing I'll say, I do believe that a lot of stuff we see on social media, I applaud all the people that are trying to keep us woke about what's going on, because there are a lot of things to get distracted by. And there are a lot of issues, and sometimes it just feels so overwhelming. And you just like, why are we enacting these type of laws? And I just hope that the masses I hope if we are born inherently good, that there are actually more good people than there are bad people. And
Yeah.
I just hope the good people don't get tired, they don't grow weary in doing good.
Yeah. Well, with that, we're going to sign off for the evening. And the bottom line is, at least the message from us here at Hey Sister, is get informed, stay informed, and be active. Not just on social media, but make sure that you are registered to vote. Make sure that you actually vote, that you vote in all elections, that you phone, email, and text your specific representatives at your local, state, and federal levels. Your civic engagement is important beyond just the social media platforms. They do see that, they do respond, but you got to take it a step further. And so just stay engaged and stay in the game if we want to be the change we want to see. And with that, we're signing off tonight. Good night, everybody.
Good night.